Hello everyone, here's what else I saw in February. Here's what else I saw last month that I didn't already tell you about. What you don't know is that I've done this opening 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 times, and I think I've said February correctly maybe 2 times in all of those attempts. So yeah, here's what else I saw last month that I didn't already tell you about. You know what month it was. You can read the title. It's a short list this time. There are some movies I thought I would watch this month that I just didn't get around to. I didn't have the time, or I didn't feel like watching anything when I had the opportunity. It happens. It's fine. There's always next month, and maybe this video won't be so complicated to edit. Movie number 1 is 1945's 2 O'Clock Courage, a quick-moving film from RKO directed by Anthony Mann. Tom Conway stars as a man who finds himself on a street corner with a head injury and no knowledge of who or where he is. He's picked up by a bubbly cab driver, played by Anne Rutherford, who decides to help him figure out his identity. The mystery involves 2 questions. Who is the main character, and did he murder the man whose initials are on his hat? This is one of those short, light films where the mystery itself isn't quite so important as the fun journey the amateur detectives go on to solve it. Suspects and names and details start to run together a bit, so when the killer was revealed, I was like, okay. But what makes it a win is the jaunty pairing of Conway and Rutherford. He gets to do more comedy than I've typically seen from him, and she's a great sidekick. This film was released partway through Conway's run as The Falcon, a serial that I really am going to watch someday, and it also was the first screen appearance of future noir star Jane Greer, credited here as Betty Jane Greer. Movie number 2 is 2002's Road to Perdition, a gangster film from director Sam Mendes set in 1931. 12-year-old Michael, played by Tyler Hoechlin, elder son of mob hitman Mike Sullivan, Tom Hanks, accidentally finds out what his father does for a living when he witnesses an interrogation gone wrong. Michael's discovered, landing him and his father in hot water, which leads to them going on the run. This is a remarkably well-made film, I think, with excellent casting. Tom Hanks is always good, so not really any surprise there. Sullivan is a complicated character, as the film explicitly states, but you root for him to succeed at getting his son to safety at all costs. Tyler Hoechlin does a fine job as the serious-minded boy bearing the tremendous weight of the knowledge of good and evil, and the lesson that some people just can't be classified as good guy or bad guy. Paul Newman's head gangster in charge of the local machine, letting his men do the dirty work for him, of course, is inscrutable. Warm and grandfatherly one second, cold and ruthless the next. Like Sullivan, he is also a conflicted individual, torn between what he wants to do and what he feels he has to do. 2 other standouts are Daniel Craig as the boss's son who wants to prove himself, a kind of astonishing performance with Craig alternating between an explosive, hot-tempered nut and a sniveling baby, and Jude Law enthusiastically makes himself repulsive as a deranged assassin who becomes obsessed with nailing down the prey that keeps eluding him. The story touches on several topics: trust, priorities, loss of innocence, fathers and sons. What gripped me most, though, was how the story was told in a visual sense. I found out after the fact that Road to Perdition was adapted from a graphic novel. At first, I was shocked to learn this, and then I thought about it, and I realized it actually made sense, given the highly artistic design of so many scenes. Subtle but effective emphasis is placed on little details, like the smoke rising from the end of a Tommy gun just below frame, shards of glass flying toward the camera from a bullet shot at a car window, loud music in a house of ill repute making everything in the owner's office vibrate, including the pulp magazine under which he's tried to hide his gun. There are some neat little chain reaction things, because of this, that, because of that, this, and the inciting event is one whole train of cause and effect that leads to tragedy. The photography and cinematography do as much to communicate as the actors and the dialogue do. Cinematographer Conrad L. Hall won a posthumous Academy Award and BAFTA for his work here. It's not what I'd call a happy movie, but it does have its moments, like Sullivan teaching his son to drive, so when they're on their bank robbing spree he can drive the getaway car, but Michael doesn't quite get the hang of it, so he's still herky-jerky by the 5th holdup. There are shocking scenes and gut-punching twists, but there are also poignant moments between father and son, and acts of goodness that don't necessarily redeem the violence and the evil, but contribute to the morally gray tone. It's a grim picture that pits its anti-hero against near-impossible odds, but it's not without a sense of optimism, and on just about every level, I thought it was a very good film. Movie number 3 is 2007's Breach, a spy film directed and co-written by Billy Ray that's not so much a thriller as it is a thought-provoking drama based on the true story of the covert operation in early 2001 to take down high-ranking agent Robert Hansen, suspected of selling secrets to U.S. enemies. Chris Cooper plays Hansen, and Ryan Phillippe plays O'Neill, the ambitious FBI agent wannabe placed on duty as his assistant to keep tabs on him and collect evidence. He's given to believe by Laura Linney's character, at least in the film's depiction of events, that Hansen is a problem mainly because he's a sexual deviant, which made me say, ugh, and glance at my parents, wondering, is this movie going to be more uncomfortable to watch than I was thinking? But O'Neill's being kept in the dark on purpose. Like I said, this is more of a psychological film than an action-heavy spy flick, but it's tense in a less ostentatious way. The two men are playing a bit of a cat-and-mouse game, and Hansen doesn't even know it, and there's another level of conflict added when they both come to respect each other. This doesn't make the job any easier for O'Neill, who's starting to have problems at home because his wife has no idea what he's really up to when he goes to the office every day. I should mention, a lot of the true story was fictionalized. Elements were added to increase drama, suspense, and interpersonal conflict, but it made for a pretty good movie. Movie number 4, for contrast, is a very action-heavy film, 1997's The Peacemaker, starring Nicole Kidman and George Clooney and directed by Mimi Leder. Terrorists have taken 9 Russian nukes and detonated a 10th, killing civilians and throwing the U.S. government into confusion. Kidman is the DC nuclear expert put in charge of determining the reason behind the explosion, and Clooney is the Army Special Forces lieutenant colonel assigned to assist her, who uses his connections to figure out what's really going on. I'll be honest and say that every little detail, the who's and what's and where's, got a little complicated for me after a while. It's a 2-hour movie, but there isn't a lot of time allowed for digesting information. It's very fast-paced. But I got the key points. It's partly about stopping these bombs from making it into the wrong hands, and partly about Kidman and Clooney working together. A little passive-aggressiveness at the start eventually yields some solid teamwork following a violent interrogation and an absurdly destructive car chase in Vienna. Clooney plays a clever action hero, doing most of his own stunts, but it's actually her knowledge and expertise that saves the day. There are quite a lot of far-fetched occurrences and coincidences, as predictable as it is that the leads will always end up in the right place at the right time. It's still hard to believe. The movie does a good job giving emotional credence to its main antagonist, played by Marcel Llores, who's motivated by a desperate hunger for vengeance. The movie does feel very of its time, I'd say. It opens with a lengthy and exhilarating action sequence backed by a big Hans Zimmer score that culminates in a mushroom cloud, which is a darn good start. I don't think the movie reaches quite that peak of adrenaline again, but the climactic sequence in Manhattan comes close. And on a more somber note, you can't help being reminded of certain events that actually happened. For a real change of pace, here's movie number 5, 1947's Green Dolphin Street, an epic drama that spans many years and a few locations, chiefly the picturesque island of St. Pierre in colonial New Zealand. Sisters Marianne and Marguerite, played by Lana Turner and Donna Reed, fall in love with the same man, played by Richard Hart, who's a newcomer to the area and, unbeknownst to them, the son of the man their mother loved in her youth. Marianne is bold and ambitious and pushes the object of her affection onto the path of self-improvement, unaware of his preference for her sweet-tempered sister. Unfortunately for everyone, his inability to keep the sisters' names straight leads to a mistake that has lasting consequences. Around 30 minutes into this 140-minute movie, I thought I knew how it would turn out in the end. And I turned out to be totally wrong, which is fine because I like surprises. And I didn't find the ending a rude surprise because of the way the characters were developed to show their feelings and attitudes maturing over time. It's got a good cast. Among the leads is also Van Heflin as a guy who loves one sister from a distance for years without her knowing he exists, part of the great irony of the thing. The acting highlights came from the seniors, I thought. Frank Morgan, Gladys Cooper, Edmund Gwenn, Dame May Whitty, and Reginald Owen are also featured. There's a sumptuousness about the movie. It does feel like it's striving to be another Gone with the Wind at times, in terms of grandeur, historical significance, and even characterization. It falls short of that mark, but it does have an interesting story and message, nice costumes, and attractive settings, like the convent that's unreachable when the tide is out. Once the narrative moves to New Zealand, it becomes more of an adventure. Characters experience heartbreak and tragedy, facing natural disaster and the threat of violence from dissatisfied natives. Going into it, all I knew was that the blurb had mentioned natural disaster, and I said, "Hey Mom, I think there's a movie you might want to see." The disaster itself is actually a relatively brief part of the film, but it's a lengthy sequence with impressive special effects that earned the film an Academy Award. They're dated now, but in 1947, they were probably really something. Lastly, movie number 6 is 1962's The Password is Courage, a World War II POW escape movie in which Dirk Bogarde stars as Sergeant Major Charles Coward, the highest-ranking prisoner in the camp who frequently acts as liaison between the commandants and the POWs in between his many escape attempts. As Bogarde plays him, Coward is a charismatic figure, likable and a little mischievous, a respected leader who lives to fulfill his duty to try every means of escaping possible, even if it's just to annoy the Germans and waste their time. The opening sequence actually has him making it out and going so far that he gets an iron cross pinned on his chest. Overall, the subject matter is handled lightly. That approach did earn it some criticism at the time of its release, but its quirky British humor was one of the things I enjoyed about it. It also has some anxious moments and a stressful final act. The film co-stars Maria Pershi as a Polish underground leader and Alfred Lynch as Coward's best friend, and I enjoyed it very much. Some additional background information: The Password is Courage was released just 1 year before The Great Escape, and it bears many similarities to that movie. But the one is not ripping off the other. The Great Escape was based on a 1950 non-fiction book by Paul Brickhill about British POWs in Stalag Luft III in Sagan, Poland. The Password is Courage was based on a 1954 memoir by John Castle, a pseudonym for Ronald Charles Payne and John Williams Garrod, about Coward's experiences at Stalag 8B. From a little extra research I did, and this is why putting these videos together takes such a long time, because I get lost on these rabbit trails, I think I did find a connection between the two movies, the two stories. I believe the POWs in this story, The Password is Courage, were transferred to this camp from the one depicted in The Great Escape when that camp became overcrowded. I thought that was very interesting. Another point: one part of Coward's memoir has to do with his witnessing of atrocities at Auschwitz. He went on to testify at the Nuremberg trials about his observations, stating that, quote, "nobody could be at or near Auschwitz without knowing what was going on." However, while the film refers to Auschwitz in passing when Coward is transferred to an adjacent camp, it doesn't go into this. A sequence of drawings of the camp were removed because it was felt they weren't the right match with the overall tone. I can't judge whether or not this was the right decision because I haven't seen those drawings. I don't know in what context they were going to be presented. I would like to reiterate that just because you've seen The Great Escape, a movie I love, doesn't mean this one's not worth seeing. I could go on a rant about how much I don't like that attitude, how much it drives me crazy when people say, "Oh, this movie is just a ripoff of this one and it's garbage. You should see this movie and, ignore the other one." Because, just don't presume to tell people what they should watch and what they should prefer. If there are two movies that have very similar or even identical stories, let people decide for themselves what they like. And remember, a movie isn't just about the plot or about some plot details. There are all those other factors that go into the execution. Change a few of those variables, like music and cast and setting, and you get a very different movie. So I did kind of go on the rant, but very minimalized. Okay, that's all I've got this time around. Not as many films as usual, like I said, but since I talked a little longer about a couple of them, it evens out. This video is probably about as long as it would have been if I talked about 10 movies. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of any of these movies if you've seen them in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.